Hello there, welcome to this pre-exam briefing for People's Health and Elizabethans. Okay, so this exam is 1 hour 45 minutes. It focuses on the topics of people's health and the Elizabethans, and the total marks for this paper is 80. So when you're looking at people's health, it's a good idea just to refresh your memory on what the key themes are. So it's about impact of living conditions or lifestyles, response to epidemics, and improving public health. When you get causation questions, it's useful to think about the key factors, which are beliefs, attitudes and values, local and national government, science and technology, urbanisation, and wealth and poverty. And of course, remember our 4 distinct time periods: medieval times, 1250 to 1500, early modern, 1500 to 1750, industrial, 1750 to 1900, and modern era, 1900 to the present day. Okay, so for people's health, this is the same exam structure as you would get for Making America. So question 1, they're the gateway questions, 1A, 1B, 1C. Just remember, you can have one word or short phrase answers. Do be specific. Remember, there are a range of correct answers. Question 2, a clear and organised summary analysing. It's worth 9 marks. You need 2 or more paragraphs, detailed knowledge, and link your analysis to 1 or more second order concepts. And in the bottom left there, you can see a reminder of what second order concepts are. So for example, write a clear and organised summary that analyses people's lives in Britain in the period 1750 to 1900. You could have a causation focus and talk about perhaps why living conditions got worse during this time. Or you could have a change approach to talk about how people's lives perhaps improved, about how living conditions might have improved during this time between 1750 and 1900. Or perhaps you could look at similarity and difference and looking at the differences in the lives between rich and poor people between 1750 and 1900. Whichever approach you take, it's important to be analytical and really honing in on those second order concepts for question number 2. Question number 3 is an explanation question linked to cause consequence. So you need 2 or more paragraphs, detailed and specific knowledge, and linked to the second order concept of cause and consequence. Now, as you can see in this example question, it's a why question, a causation focus. Why did living conditions in medieval towns have such an important impact on people's health? So using some good knowledge of those living conditions, but then crucially explaining why they impacted on people's health. Question 4 or 5 is evaluating and interpretation. So you're going to have to look at both questions carefully, decide which one to do, and then you're going to decode the question, have a quick plan. You're looking for 4 well-explained arguments with a degree of balance, which means that at least one of your arguments must agree and at least one of them must disagree. You need detailed knowledge throughout, SOC language to analyse, and you need to make those clear links back to the question. This supports the view that, for example, government responses to the plague were more effective in the period 1500 1750, etc. Now, if you do get 2 time periods mentioned in the question, you must write about both of those time periods as well. Conclusion, you've got your clinching argument to give your final and overall opinion, remembering of course not to sit on the fence and to have a strong opinion. There's some useful phrases there for how you can include evidence, and also some phrases for how you can analyse. Elizabethans is the other half of the paper. So you've got some interpretations to deal with here. Most tricky probably is question 6. So if you are struggling on this one, remember to watch the guide video for question 6. So question 6A, it says identify and explain how an artist or writer has created an interpretation. So you get 1 mark for identifying how they created a particular view. You might, for example, talk about what technique they've used, for example, okay, and then you're going to get your extra 2 marks for explaining and elaborating on that. So a good way to think of it is sort of 1 sentence to identify and then 2 more sentences to explain and elaborate. So as it says in the command words for the question, it's identify and explain. You can get artistic interpretations for this, film posters, and also interpretations from historians. And question 6b, you are then going to follow up that same interpretation. So you are going to follow that up, and you've got to imagine that if you were doing some further research on an aspect of the interpretation, what would you choose to investigate? So the starting point for this question is to explain what impression you actually got from the interpretation, include a quote perhaps, and obviously use your answer for 6a to guide you in this. Then you're going to explain what you're going to inquire into and what your inquiry question would be. Now, whatever you're going to inquire into, think SOC language, think about second order concepts. So think about creating a question which is maybe linked to cause and consequence, similarity and difference, or change and continuity. So if you think about it, is your question linked to a second order concept? If it is, it's probably going to be doing the job. And then the third point is explain how it would help a historian find out more about the topic, why it would perhaps be a good or an interesting question. And obviously it's got to follow up and help them to find out more about a particular topic. So if you look at this example on here, it's quite hard to read, but it says explain how this helps us to analyze and understand the nature of Elizabethan society. So whatever you follow up has to link with what they're asking you to follow up on. So in this case, it's following up on something about Elizabethan society. So that's question 6. If you found that hard, just watch the guide video. Is the question that lots of people find difficult on Elizabethans. Now, for question 7, they will give you 2 different interpretations. So the example one here focused on the threat of Mary Queen of Scots, and invariably these 2 interpretations will be different. So paragraph 1 is all about explaining how different the 2 interpretations are. So you need to pick out what the view of each interpretation is, support that with quotes from the interpretation, use comparing language. You need to sort of make a judgment about the extent of the difference, how much or how different are they. So if you can find any similarities between the 2, that's helpful as well. But they will always be different, because otherwise the question doesn't work. So paragraph 2 is explaining why the interpretations differ, and generally what you need to think about for this is the provenance of the interpretations. So who made them? Try and get under the skin of who the author is, like what's their purpose, what's their audience. That's a couple of really good things to think about. One top tip for this is if you get a book, for example, are there any clues in the title of the book about what their focus might be, what their purpose might be? And then question 8 or 9 is evaluating an interpretation. It's actually worth 20 marks, this, and the reason why it's worth 20 marks is because they actually give you a quote from a actual historian. So it's a little bit harder to understand the interpretation, so they give you a few more marks for this question, a couple more marks. So you're looking for 4 well-explained arguments with a degree of balance, detailed knowledge throughout, SOC language to analyze, and a big tip for this question: make sure you're making clear links back to the question and quote that historical interpretation in your answer. So for example, question 9 says the belief that, quote, new discoveries could bring untold riches. You want to use those phrases like new discoveries, untold riches throughout your answer, so you're staying really focused on the question. That's a really important tip for question 8 and question 9. So you only obviously do one of those questions. Your final top tips, just watch your timings for this question. There's quite a lot to do in this exam, so watch your timings. Little tip for this: if you are running out of time, always make sure that you get your 4 key arguments on the Elizabethans. Don't do the clinching argument until you've done 4 key arguments. So people's health, final top tips: make sure you link to a second order concept for that clear and organised summary question. Remember that lifestyles means living conditions, or if they talk about people's lives, that means living conditions as well. For question 4, if it asks you to write about 2 different time periods, you must compare them. Elizabethans 6b, begin with what impression you get from the interpretation before you start to talk about your area of further research and what your inquiry question would be. And just make sure that any area for further research and writing your own inquiry question, it must link to a second order concept. And whatever you choose to research must link to the topic focus of the question. So if it asks you about daily lives, Elizabethan society, Elizabeth's power, your question must focus on that. So it's really important to decode the question for 6b. Question 7, how and why they differ. So 1 paragraph on how far they differ, 1 paragraph on why they differ, And for the why, focus on purpose and audience. Just think about who has made it. That's the key for this question. Who is that person? Why would they be writing these different things? And then question 8-9, quick plan. You've got your 4 key arguments. Use your SOC language and make a clear link back to that historical interpretation. Make sure you're quoting that, and obviously a clinching argument in the conclusion. Okay, so that's that final top tips for People's Health and Elizabethans. Good luck with the exams.